Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to study about the internal structure of the human heart. When we say anatomy of a living structure, anatomy means the detail of the inner structures, the detail that is present inside the body. उन structures के बारे में जब हम बात करते हैं तो उसको हम कहते हैं anatomy. External structure हमने देख लिया है heart का, and today we are going to see how the human heart is internal. Internally, the human heart is made up of 4 chambers. 2 upper thin-walled chamber, which are known as the atria. ठीक है, इनके muscles कम होते हैं, ये इनको हम atria कहते हैं, and 2 thick-walled ventricles which are present lower. The atria, they receive blood from different parts of the body, and the ventricles, they pump blood out of the heart. The heart acts as a double pump. डबल पंप का मतलब ये है कि इसके अंदर 2 different circulation patterns जो हैं वो follow हो रहे हैं, and oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is completely separated and they are following their own pathway. One pump is sending blood to the lungs and back to the heart after oxygenation, and the second pump is receiving blood from the lungs and sending it to the rest of the body. Now, the heart has 2 sides, the right side and the left side. The right side of the heart receives deoxygenated blood from the body, and the left side of the heart receives oxygenated blood from the lungs and transports this oxygenated blood to different parts of the body. Okay. Now, when we look at the heart internally, we are not going to consider the valves at present. Let us first of all see how the chambers are. These are the upper chambers. This blue color is depicting the right side of the heart, and this is showing the left side of the heart. Right side of the heart को इन्होंने blue color क्यों किया हुआ है? सिर्फ ये differentiate करने के लिए कि यहाँ पर जो blood है, it is deoxygenated. ओरिजिनली जो डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड होता है वो भी रेड कलर का होता है, ठीक है, लेकिन बुक के अंदर इट इज शोन इन ब्लू सो दैट आपके लिए डिफरेंस करना आसान हो जाए. ब्राइट रेड एंड डल रेड कलर होता है मेनली जो हमारी बॉडी के अंदर वेसल्स के अंदर जो ब्लड मूव कर रहा है. कलर डिफरेंस सिर्फ ऑक्सीजनेशन एंड डीऑक्सीजनेशन की वजह से जो है वो होता है. वेयर इन दिस पिक्चर we can see that the right side, this is the right side, which is facing you, facing your left. This is the right side, and it has deoxygenated blood. It receives deoxygenated blood from various parts of the body. And this is the right side, and it receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. The 2 upper chambers, 1 and 2. These 2 upper chambers, they are known as the atria or the auricles. They are known as the atria or the auricles. First of all, we will discuss the detail of the right side of the heart. The lower chambers, these chambers, they are known as the ventricles. Ventricles, the right ventricle, the left ventricle. Deoxygenated blood falls into the right auricle or right atrium through the Vena Cava. The superior Vena Cava is bringing deoxygenated blood from those parts of the body which are placed above the heart. And the inferior Vena Cava is bringing the blood from the lower parts of the body. Superior and inferior is just to differentiate कि as the heart इनका जो है वो position क्या है. ठीक है, inferior from the lower parts of the body and superior from the upper parts of the body. ठीक है, okay. Now this is the first part of the heart where we are going to receive blood. This is the right auricle or right atrium. The atrium is not so muscular as the ventricles. The ventricles have a lot of muscle. The atria do not have muscle. From the right atrium, blood moves into the ventricles, the right ventricles. Between the right atrium and the left atrium, there is a wall which is known as the interauricular septum. Let me go to the board first of all. बोर्ड के ऊपर जाती हूँ, बोर्ड के ऊपर एक्सप्लेन करते हैं, फिर उसके बाद हम वापस आते हैं. ठीक है. Okay, now we have the board over here. Now इधर अब हम आ जाते हैं towards the internal structure of the heart. Between the two atria, which are the upper chambers, there is a wall that is separating them. That wall is known as the interauricular septum. उन चीजों को याद रखना है. Septum singular, septa plural. Interauricular septum. ठीक है, या interauricular septum. Whereas this septum, which is also a name for wall, इसको wall कहते हैं, इसको division कहते हैं. ठीक है, तो interauricular septum जो है, it is या interatrial septum. Interauricular septum भी कह सकते हैं, interatrial septum भी कह सकते हैं. We can also call it interatrial septum. This is present between the atria or between the auricles or the upper chambers of the heart. Then the wall that is separating the ventricles is known as the interventricular septum. This is between the ventricles, the right and the left ventricle. Now we can observe that the human heart has two completely separated chambers. किंगडम एनिमेलिया जब हमने पढ़ा था, तो हमने पढ़ा था कि फिश के अंदर 2 चैम्बर्स हैं, एम्फीबिया के अंदर 3 चैम्बर्स हैं, 2 अपर एंड 1 लोअर. रेप्टिलिया के अंदर जो है 2 completely separated chambers upper हैं, then जो ventricles हैं वो partially separated हैं, कि उसके अंदर the septum जो है it is not entire, it is not complete except in crocodile. एवीज के अंदर आपके पास 4 चैम्बर्स हैं और आपके पास मेमेलिया के अंदर आपके पास 4 चैम्बर्स हैं हार्ट के अंदर. क्यों? क्योंकि these septum are completely formed and they are entirely separating the two parts of the two sides of the heart. Now, our focus in this lecture is going to be the right side of the heart. Okay, the right side of the heart, let me come over here. The right side of the heart, it receives deoxygenated blood. It receives deoxygenated blood from the different parts of the body through the venous system. The venous system is actually the collecting system through the vena cava. The vena cava are actually the largest veins of the body. The superior and the inferior vena cava, I have already told you the difference between them. ठीक है, superior and the inferior vena cava. The superior and the inferior vena cava, they drop the deoxygenated blood into the, याद रखिए, right auricle या right atrium. ठीक है, they drop the blood into the right auricle या right atrium, and from there this blood is going to be passed on to the right ventricle. The right ventricle is a muscular structure. The right auricle and the right ventricle are separated by a septum, and this septum is known as right auricular ventricular, right auricular ventricular septum, या हम इसको कह सकते हैं right atrioventricular septum. ठीक है, तो राइट एट्रियोवेंट्रिकुलर सेप्टम भी कह सकते हैं या राइट ऑरिकुलर वेंट्रिकुलर सेप्टम. नाउ दिस सेप्टम, it has an opening present inside it which is connecting the right auricle to the right ventricle. This opening is guarded by a valve. This opening is known as the right auricular या atrioventricular aperture. Right atrioventricular aperture, and it is guided by a specific valve which is known as atrioventricular valve. The right atrioventricular valve, because it receives a large amount of blood. याद रखिए इस बात को, क्योंकि इसके अंदर बहुत ज्यादा ब्लड आता है, तो इसको कंट्रोल करने के लिए जो वाल्व है, इट हैज टू बी स्ट्रॉन्गर. तो इस वाल्व के वी हैव 3 flaps of the valve, and the valve is known as the tricuspid valve. This tricuspid valve, in yesterday's lecture, I told you that the endometrium is transferred into various shapes. This tricuspid valve is attached to the endometrial structure, which is known as the papillary muscle. Papillary muscle is a modification of the endometrium. And this papillary muscle holds the tricuspid valve in position by a protein cord, which is known as the chordae tendineae. Now let us go back to the presentation, then I'll come back to this again. Chordae tendineae. अब हम देखते हैं right side of the heart. हमने सिर्फ इस लेक्चर में right side of the heart पढ़ना है. Now this is the right side of the heart. This is what we are studying. The upper part of the heart is not muscular. The lower ventricle, this is the myocardium. The myocardium is thicker in the ventricular region. This is the atrioventricular aperture, right atrioventricular aperture, which is guarded by a 3-door valve, which is known as the tricuspid valve. इसमें 3 हैं. These are the papillary muscles which hold the valves in place. Blood flows from the auricle or the atrium into the ventricle. And as blood fills up into the ventricle, the pressure of blood causes these chordae tendineae to relax, and the valves close this aperture to control the amount of blood coming into the right ventricle. Now, because of the pressure exerted by the blood, this valve opens up, and this valve is present in the artery that is going to supply blood to the lungs. Now, this is deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood is pushed out of the ventricle into the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery is the only artery in the human body, in the mature human body, which is providing deoxygenated blood, which is distributing deoxygenated blood. It is going to transport deoxygenated blood to the lungs, pulmonary lungs. And from there, it is going to be oxygenated and going to be brought back to the left side of the heart. So this deoxygenated, and this is guarded by moon-shaped, half-moon-shaped valves, which are known as semilunar valve. And because it is present in the pulmonary artery, it is known as the pulmonary semilunar valve. यहाँ से ये blood आपके पास lungs में जाएगा, एंड लंग्स के अंदर इसकी ऑक्सीजनेशन होगी, और वही ब्लड वापस आएगा into the left side of the heart. That is why the human heart is called the double pump, because it pumps the same blood twice, once to the lungs and second time to the different parts of the body. The right atrium receives deoxygenated blood through the superior and the inferior vena cava from all organs of the body. As the right atrium contracts, the blood is pushed to the right ventricle through the aperture which is guarded by the tricuspid valve. ठीक है, लेफ्ट एट्रियम का काम जो है उसको हम बाद में देखिए. ठीक है, इसको देखिए. Deoxygenated blood enters the body in the right atrium, then it goes to the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle it goes to the pulmonary artery. From the pulmonary artery it goes to the lungs for oxygenation. The right atrium and the right ventricle, they are guarded by a tricuspid valve, which is a 3-flap valve. From the lower parts of the body, inferior vena cava is bringing blood. From the upper parts of the body, the superior vena cava is bringing blood, which open separately, very close to each other in the right atrium. Now, this is all about the right side anatomy of the heart. In the next class, we will study about the left side anatomy of the heart. From the right ventricle, the blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery, which is guarded by semilunar valves, and that blood is then pushed into the lungs. That was all for today. We will go on with the lecture of the left side of the heart, and do be updated with my lectures so that you can have a better concept and understanding in an easy way. Okay, Allah Hafiz.